All right, hey, what's going on, my friends? This is your boy Turgon, the grumpy ass dwarf, and that's the last time I'm going to be using that name, as I'll be changing names at some point, probably at the beginning of the next season, depending on what faction and campaign we play. Thanks for joining me this evening. We have a fun little lineup here for you. I have just some notes that I'll share. Mostly it's for me, but also just so you have an idea what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Just going to go over a little bit about my history, where I came from, what I've played, kind of just a recap of all my seasons. And then we're going to do a recap of Server 54, Tactics Evolved, Season 5, from the Erebor perspective. My name is Turgon the Grumpy Dwarf, and I play with the Fellowship Serve. And a little history about me. You can see here I've got a couple of wins. Second place in Season 1, Explorer Season 3, second place Season 5. So, just to give you kind of a rundown, Season 1, my name was Decetheus. I played Erebor, and I managed to eke out 1.1 million prestige. Pretty proud of that. It was an interesting season. It was the first season I played, obviously. I started playing the game about 2 weeks after launch, around the second week of October. And still a couple of guys from that team, the LOIG, Lords of the Iron Gate team, are still playing with me here. Shout outs to my boys, Swellisi, Big Mark, D-Trope, the OG crew from LOIG. Alex Carr, yeah, I know you're still out there somewhere. Sam Spade wasn't LOIG, but he was on our server as well. So we're also playing with some folks that we played against in season one that were on the Linden squad. We were on the Erebor squad. Nihilists. Who else? Azores. There's a bunch of guys. So shout out to you guys. Tremendous teammates ever since. Season 2, we played Rohan. Team played called Gold. My name was Ecthalion. Ended up with 2.2 million prestige thanks to the delicious Momokill Gimli combo. Um, Probably will never hit ring level 225 again, but you never know. Season 3, I played Lothlorien, and that was the first time I named myself Torgon. It was an Explorer badge, and that season was pretty much well defined by the way that the other faction leaders in Lothlorien dictated really the outcome of that season. It was not a favorable outcome. Now I'm just going to leave it at that. I managed to eke out 1.7 million this particular season, which I was happy with at the time. I'm still happy with it, and that season is what it is. Then season 4, we went and played War of the Ring campaign, and we won it. I played as Turgon the Wise. We were Lothlorien this one as well. Ended up with 2 million prestige on the button. That was a fun little season. Proud of what we accomplished there. That was really the first time I played with Serve. We just happened to take on the name Gold for this one as a group. And then in season 5, we played as Serve. Renowned creator, 2.5 million prestige. Proud of that number as well. It was a fun season. Tactics evolved. And so let's talk about this season here. Um, I'll probably be Turgon again next season, just depending on what faction we're playing. I might do a different name. I might go back to Ecthelion. Who knows? We'll see. So, season 5 recap. Oh, I mean, what an epic season. And it just ended a few hours ago. I took a little bit of time to just kind of collect my thoughts, talk with some people, gather some insight into certain happenstances that occurred throughout the course of the season that I was curious about. Some intriguing feedback that I received, and I'm going to be happy to share some of that with you. So really wanted to talk through kind of everything by looking at the map, particularly this corner of the map that we started in up here. Geez, I don't even remember where on earth I started on this map. Wow. Off the top of my head, I really honestly can't remember. I think somewhere down here. Tell you the truth, I started somewhere in around here, and it was a tough season because we're surf. We were kind of the third wheel in Erebor. But I think we were the ultimately, when you look at this season in retrospect, we were kind of the glue that kept everything together for a while. The other two fellowships, Beer and Farm, very strong players, very strong fellowships, tremendous farmers, tremendous fighters for sure. Um, we'll leave it at that at this point. We'll talk more about kind of some of the inner Erebor dynamics when I get to like the season end kind of stuff. But the first week of the season was definitely frustrating because it was one of those. Personally, for me, I started the season late. I was on a business trip when the season started, and so I couldn't log in the first day until I really had knew I had a chunk of time to sit down and focus on playing. Because those first 24 hours are pivotal in any season to establish your farm, level up your commanders, take advantage of those 24-hour buffs. So I'm logging in, I'm farming, and one of the trends I'm noticing throughout the whole first week of the season is that like I path to a place, and then I go away for 10 or 15 minutes, let some stamina refresh, get a drink, and I come back, and the whole thing has been farmed by one or two other guys. So it was really frustrating, and particularly, you talk with these people and they push back on you, and it's rude, um, in a rude way. And then, 3 weeks later, they're not even playing anymore anyway, and you're just like, wow. But this season was so dynamic. Tiles changed um, owners so many times, particular, like probably all over the map. Really, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think in terms of just pure action, this was the most active server I've been on in all 5 seasons. Absolute total insanity. So that was the kind of the first week, and then week two was kind of when the fighting started with Rune, up and around Kelduin Vale. In this area, they had established some sort of like a border on some river up here, and some beer guys decided to cross it, and then from that point forward, it just we never took our foot off the gas pedal. Like it felt like it at all. Rune, even though faction alliances, united factions, I should say, it felt like it took a really long time for that to come online. The server, it was probably around week 4 when we got faction alliances, but teams talked and formed their alliance, gentlemen's agreements essentially before the unified faction was unlocked. So Rune and Variags were friends at the time, so we were feeling a lot of pinch after Rune started attacking us. Then Variag started attacking us. Variag from the western portion of our territory, and Rune on the east. At one point, Rune had this territory, and they were at this keep, and we were able to push them back. Meanwhile, Variags had been pushing into Elven King Halls, and there was one particular full war cycle where I believe we repelled something like 4 separate uh, organized sieges on the keep. So there was some really exciting play, fighting pretty much purely the evil side throughout the first, half of the server, maybe a little bit more, from about weeks 2 until about, I want to say, 6. We were just pretty much executively fighting Variag and Rune. Around week 5 or week 6, just towards the end of that, Mordor did come up north and eventually at some point snagged um, this Kelduin Vale territory, and we're trying to come at Dale. Um, and they actually did make it a pretty good ways towards Iron Hills Keep. This fort that I have here, where I have my Eowyn, this tile that she's been sitting on forever, gathering for throughout the course of the time I've been where I am on the map. I took this tile from a Mordor player, so that just gives you kind of an idea of how far Mordor went. We pushed them all back, we pushed them all out, and then around week 5 or 6, Lothlorien decided that they were going to attack us. Um, that was part of the reason. They said, essentially, um, it was because of some actions that Rohan had taken up in the north here. But it was just ultimately we could see through it. They just wanted to dominate the map. They weren't going to give anyone any space anywhere. At that point in time, during the server, Lothlorien basically owned everything in the middle of the map, and were pushing Gondor pretty hard. Gondor was down to maybe 3 or 4 control points, I would want to say, down here in their, their core area. Linden was entirely wiped off of the map. They took Arnor took most of their lands, but there was also a sprinkle of stuff that was taken by Lothlorien. I think Lothlorien had all of this stuff kind of in the middle of the map. So it was, Lothlorien got off to an enormous start in terms of the farm. I did an analysis of the server about 4 days into the server. I want to say I took a spreadsheet and I looked at how many players were in each fellowship. Top, I want to say 25 fellowships. I took down how many players were in it, what their production rate was, and ranked everything and grouped them. So there was essentially 3 fellowships was the max per faction throughout the course of the server. Rune really only had 1.5. They had about 160 players. Varieg was the only dark side team that had a full 3 fellowships. Mordor really was only 1 fellowship. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the overall server was like in terms of the number of players per faction. We have about basically 3 full fellowships in every faction except for the ones that I mentioned on the dark side. Yeah, so it was, yeah, and it was it was nuts. And around week 6, after Arnor and Loth started attacking us up in the north and making their way down towards Elven King Call, Variags flipped and started attacking Lothlorien. At the time, it certainly seemed like it felt like it was because Variags pitied us and respected us as players for our ability to repel them, but it's just because his Loth was clearly bullying everything around the map. It was an unfair matchup. It was basically 5 factions versus 2, with them fighting us up here, Ereborn, Rohan up here, and they had already dismantled the other 2 factions. If you look at it from a 5v4 perspective, so Variag flipping really flipped the script entirely and turned it into a 5v4 fight in favor of us. They held Lothlorien in check. We repelled Arnor. Arnor at one point also, they had taken Elven King Halls, they had taken Lake Town, and they were preparing to assault. Actually, I think they did assault Dale, and we repelled them, and then pushed them all the way the hell out. Um, Rune at one point came up here and took Withered Heath. I think Arnor kind of gifted it to them. Eventually, we pushed them out. We had Great Rune until the very, very last day. So that kind of paints the picture of you, and of everything that happened, and just kind of to add a couple of extra points about the Variag flipping. They also had found out that Lothlorien had planned to betray them. They weren't going to give Variag anything this season. It was pretty clear, the guys over in Lothlorien felt like they could 100% dominate the map. Like they wanted to eradicate everyone. And I think ultimately, if they had just been satisfied with the success they had, and left us to fight Variag, we probably would have kept just fighting Variag and Rune indefinitely throughout the entirety of the server, had Loth and Arnor just chilled out with their success against Linden and Gondor and just left us alone, because we had no intention of violating that map at any given point, as far as I'm aware. Um, and that really comes to like the one point I have on my agenda here about bad faith negotiating, because we didn't end up giving Lothlorien their capital back. Arnor was able to successfully keep Linden away from theirs, and it was because of bad faith negotiating, really, because the Lothlorien leaders that were in contact with us um, made a lot of promises that it was clear they had no intention of keeping, and more importantly, they were taking screenshots of conversations we were having with them about potentially, teaming up to go after the ring after Variag took it. They sent those screenshots straight to Variag because I guess it was some sort of an act of desperation or something, trying to create some sort of a wedge between Variag and us. And it didn't change anything. It just we just saw right through it. It was pretty low. So because of that, we decided as a group, essentially as a group, between Lyndon Gondor, Erebor, Rohan, and Variag, that we were just not going to allow Lothlorien to have anything. And that's why they ended up this season with what they have, which is virtually nothing. The last basically 10 to 12 days of the season was just literally, this map, just Erebor Rohan growing, Mordor running all over the place, capturing a whole bunch of stuff, Linden taking back everything that was stolen from them, and then chewing into the majority of Arnor's empire out in the west here. I mean, it's just been absolute craziness. It was a crazy server. It was very exciting. In the final days, it was also mentioned that, over with from an Erebor perspective, Beer decided they wanted to go after Variag and kind of broke off from what Farm and Serve wanted to do. And we could have probably accomplished more, maybe even going after the top spot, because we ended up number two. If you come over to this season target for Unified Faction Control, we ended up number two, and who knows, we might have been able to get number one if we had been all on board together and taking more keeps the last day here. And we just lost Greater Rune here the last day, but we also took Rivendell on the last day. So there was a whole lot of activity. I mean, I think Rohan took three keeps out here in the west in one day. Like, it was it was a really crazy server. I mean, it was really, really active. And the other things that reflect that, if you come in here and you look at the leaderboard in terms of contribution, I mean, people having 4 million prestige is impressive. If you go down, there's the top 19 players had, around 2 million prestige or more. You keep going down the list, and there's a lot of people that in our faction alliance, that had at least 1 million prestige. So it just goes to show how much fighting there was on the server. 83 people with a contribution score above 10,000. Now, I mean, if, contribution is basically an amalgamation. Like, you're just adding, your prestige to your siege damage, and number of enemies defeated when occupying structures for the first time. So you can jack up your score a little bit early in the season, um, by throwing yourself against keeps, essentially, and having good siege. I didn't do any of that. Like, 98% of my contribution score literally is from prestige. Um, so very wild, very wild. Yeah, final days, great flip will cause it. Yep, I think we touched upon this basically. Very interesting season. I hope you enjoyed the recap. We're gonna do one last little thing before signing off here, which is talking about Gandalf the Grey. I want to talk through, here's how I gear him, how use him to fight versus light versus dark. And his talents and stuff. So I'll start with his items. I have him rep 10, so he's high, but not super high. And I like the Elven Dirk on him a lot because it gives him might focus. I don't care so much really about the speed, but I'll take it. And the army speed for elves also doesn't make too much difference because I don't really use elves on him, pretty much at all. At least at the end portion of the season. Maybe earlier in the season, I was using Sentinels on him, so that was good. But towards the end of the season, I finally was able to get myself some sharpshooters. I really like sharpshooters with Gandalf a lot. About 5,000 sharpshooters with 750 cataphracts up front, and that'll get the job done. You'll be able to solo 200 tiles pretty much no problem. For the chest, again, might focus, army defense melee. That's really the core why I like this for him so much. He needs all these things. I like the gallant. It gives him another 18 might. I like jacking up Gandalf's might so that we can get as much damage out of the army as possible. For the head, again, might focus and stun immunity for the first 2 rounds. He's an excellent counter to Witch King. This makes it even more because Witch King stuns during the first 2, maybe even 3 rounds. So that mitigates that quite a bit. And then for his accessory, I used the fireworks, more focus, helping out the ranged attack, and I right now have the one with the pursuit trait. I was going to test that maybe against um, Gillies and Grima's, but I don't think it's really done anything for me, so I'll probably go back to this one, which is going to give me I think it's 9%, whatever it is on this one. Yeah, 9% from the Dirk, and then I'll get another 9% from the fireworks. So I'll put that back together once I get to bag end. From a talent perspective, you come in here and you look, this is definitely a dark side fighting build because I have the 7 points in Champion of the Light in case there's any orcs, urukai, or trolls. Most of what Evil's playing these days is evil men, so this ability really doesn't do anything. But if you take the points away, then they'll surprise you and start throwing some trolls and stuff at you because they're beefy frontline tanky units. So um, when they do have those units in there, having Champion of the Light is really, really helpful for bringing them down. Otherwise, if you're fighting a light side opponent, you can still keep this one in case you run into a Galadriel, because that negative 50% focus damage mitigation can come in pretty handy. Or you can reroute all those points over into the wizard so that you're lowering more defense and getting even more out of your army attack. I've seen some people put those points into the gray and level up fleeting moments. Obviously, if I was taking 7 points out of Champion of the Light, the first thing I would do would be finish off free peoples. There's a lot of variation in what you can do with him. From a PvE perspective, most people prefer, instead of going with the R5, they go with the gray first. Help get some healing, and which reduces the amount of wounded and dead troops you have at the end of the battle. So, a couple of things to think about there in terms of his build: light side versus dark side, PvP versus PvE. Just to talk through real quick, his PvP, he's not super viable PvP unless you're going up against evil, and he counters, like I said, Witch King really, really well. He also does really well against Lurts. Lurts will kill about half your archers, but he'll get the job done. And that's really it, other than like if they're throwing some like bad comms at you just with like some pathers or siegers or stuff, he'll do real well. But otherwise, like he gets countered hard by Khaldun, Gorbag, Sauron. Um, he does not do well against light side commanders. Gimli completely shreds him, especially if he's got some sort of helmet that mitigates stuns. Anyone that's got stun mitigation stuff is just going to blow right through him. Galadriel, because of all of her madness, she blows right through him. So he's just not really a great PvP commander, but he's a good commander to have in your stable because he's going to help your farm. You can just send him out to farm somewhere. Usually by around level 30, 35, he could start soloing 200 tiles. So he's a good comm. That's why I wanted to talk through him because he does have a lot of specific uses from both a PvE and PvP perspective, and I just wanted to kind of paint that picture. I hope you liked the video, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch it. If you have any comments, feedback, recommendations, please leave them in the comments below. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. I appreciate you. I hope you had a fun season. I know I did. I'm looking forward to taking a little bit of time away and just relaxing because I play the game really, really hard. So, congratulations to the Variags. Congratulations to all the folks that got rewards. Um, I used my reward right away to get myself another whip for my boy Aragorn here. So he finally got a star on his blazing tongue. So that's the reward ultimately that I reaped from all of our labor this grueling season. It was a fun, exciting season. I look forward to seeing what we're gonna do next season and being with you guys through that. I'm planning on chronicalizing as much of that season as I possibly can through these short videos. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I appreciate it. Feel free to leave me a message on Discord or in game as well if there's anything you would like to chat about. All right, my friends, take care. Stay well.